Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Succah, and we are on Daf Hey Amud Aleph, the last narrow lines. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shelema for Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, Shav Refuah Shelema Be'ezrat Hashem. It's also been dedicated this month's learnings by the Shei family, Dayan family, Kohen families. Should be an ultimate zchut for all their mishpachot, Be'ezrat Hashem, amen. And last but not least, it's been dedicated for Refuah Shelema of Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, that should have full recovery, Refuah Shelema, amen. And also for Refuah Shelema of Yosef ben Shahram, that should have full recovery, Be'ezrat Hashem, amen. So we started a fascinating question. One of the members, again, remember the paper trail. This is one of the teachings that was taught in the yeshiva of Rav Ashi by the students of Rav Ashi. And why is it the Gemara, the Mishnah said that we know a sukkah that is taller than 20 amah is psula, and also a sukkah that is more shallow, lower than 10 tfachim is pasul. So how do we know that? And the Gemara said, well, because anything that's less than 10 tfachim is below the domain. We said the Shekhinah never came down from the 10 tfachim, and the first thing that we learned that from was the kaporet, that the Aaron plus the kaporet was 9 plus 1 tfachim, that's 10. So the Shekhinah that spoke to Moshe, residing above the kaporet in between the keruvim, must have been above Asara, hence you need at least 10 tfachim. That's how we learned it. But I said, okay, fine, amazing. So we know that Aaron was 9 tfachim tall, that we know because it says Amah v'chetzi rochva v'amah v'chetzi komata. Amazing. Amah v'chetzi, assuming that every amah is 6 tfachim, will give you 9 tfachim. But it doesn't say how thick the height of kaporet was. It says it was 2.5 by 1.5, the orech and the rochav, but the height, the koma, doesn't have. And the Gemara said, well, we learn it from the smallest kli that existed in the Beit HaMikdash, because you could learn from small, you could learn from big. Obviously, when the Torah didn't tell you, it expects you to learn it from the smallest measurement that is there. And the smallest measurement is 1 tefach, which we learned from the misgeret of the shulchan. The way the table of the bread was placed on 4 pillars with a misgeret that went around, and then the surface was put on top of that, and then you had the lechem apalim, the 2 sides, each one 6, was a structure of kanim, and that the breads were separated from each other, stacked up 6 on each side, and that's your shulchan. That's the basic structure of the shulchan, and that element on the bottom, a beautiful piece of 1 tefach wide, miskarto tefach saviv, it would go around, and the whole thing, it was a tefach wide. So the Gemara said that that's how we learn it from. Now this is very problematic, because if you pay attention, there are things that are smaller than that even. Now, and also there are things that are bigger than that. Who says that you have to learn it from Miskeret? So the Gemara is going to challenge this on both of those accounts as it unfolds. So says the Gemara, if you are telling me that the kaporet is a kli, is one of the actual vessels of the Mishkan, isn't it more logical that we should learn the size of it from one of the actual kelim of the vessels of the Mishkan? What is a miskeret already? Miskeret is not really a vessel. Miskeret is a part of a vessel. The Gemara says no. Tafasta meruba lo tafasta. Those are going to, of course, be more than a tefach. And we have a concept in learning things we don't know from things that we do know. That's going to come up several times in today's daf. And it's all over the place. That when you are ought to learn an unknown from a series of things that are known, you go always with the smallest one because tafasta meruba lo tafasta. The thing you take too much is not correct. You want the minimum. The minimum that we could know is a tefach by miskeret. So the Gemara says, fine. If you already are telling me that we're not learning from the kelim, from the actual vessels of the Mishkan, so then Nilaf Mesis. Let's learn from the tzitz, the golden plate of the Kohen Gadol, which were the 4 special additional garments that Kohen Gadol wore, was the plate of gold that said on it, Kodesh LaHashem. So says the Gemara, that was 2 etzbaot wide. It was half the size of a tefach. A tefach is 4 etzbaot, as we'll discuss the details of that. And 2 etzbaot is the width, the thickness, not the thickness, it was a thin gold plate, but the top to bottom, the width of it would be 2 etzbaot av. The tzis, the Tanya, as we learned, tzitz domekim in tas shel zahav. The tzis of Kohen Gadol was a gold plate, v'rachav bet etzbaot, that was wide, 2 etzbaot, umukaf me'ozen le'ozen, and it would cover from one ear of Kohen Gadol all the way, covering the forehead to the other ear, and it was, of course, tied in the back with a techelet ribbon coming on the top, holding it properly. So that is the size of the tzitz. Says the Gemara, V'katuv alav bet shitin yud ke milmala v'kodesh lamet milmata. It said Kodesh LaHashem. So the way it was written, Kodesh LaHashem, was it had the yud ke vav ke, the Shem Havaya on top. It was 2 shurot, 2 lines. The top line had Kodesh, had Yud Ke Vav Ke, and the bottom line had Kodesh and a Lamed. So it would be Kodesh le Yud Ke Vav Ke. Now, 2 quick elements of a rate bite on this quickly is, first, the Tosafot says, well, it doesn't make sense to have in 2 different lines when it's read backwards. You have Yud Ke Vav Ke Havaya Kodesh Le, that doesn't read, right? So says the Tosafot, Ela, the last 2 lines of Tosafot, if you want to look at it inside, Ela yesh lefaresh ze shelo keneged ze. Kodesh Lamed bitchilat shita tachtona. It was written lower because you want to give kavod to the name of Hashem, to the name of Havaya, but it was written Kodesh Le in the bottom line, in the beginning of the line, and corresponding to that a little higher, it had the Yud Ke Vav Ke, so it reads together, but just the Yud Ke Vav Ke is a little elevated. That's first. Secondly, if you just paid attention right now, the Gemara said Yud Ke was Shura Eliona, Yud and Hey was in the top line, and Kodesh Lamed was on the bottom. So what? Wait a second. Yud Ke is one of the names of Hashem. It is, right? Ka, Sfakot, all those are Shemot Sheinam Nimchakim, correct. But says the Tosafot here again, the top Tosafot, that it was not Yud and Ke, it was Yud Ke Vav Ke. So why do you write it like this? The Gemara doesn't say. So the answer to that is, says the Tosafot, that saying Yud Ke Vav Ke, if you would written it, it was written in the Gemara like that, it was written Yud Ke Vav Ke, and you would read Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey without the ends that I just said, that is Hogeh Hashem Beotiotav. Right? Actually, the Gemara speaking about Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion, that was one of the Asara Arugei Malchut that was wrapped in the Sefer Torah that he wrote himself, and it was set on fire. The Gemara says, what was his avon? And the Gemara says, again, paraphrasing and encapsulating the Gemara's message, Gemara says, because he was Hogeh Hashem Beotiotav. He spelled out the name of Hashem Beotiotav, and that becomes a question. Says, well, his wife heard it, she should have known, that's why she also was punished, and so on. And the Gemara says, the Tosafot there, right, it says, Hogeh Hashem Beotiotav is not it's not an obvious mistake that the Tinokot Shel Bet Rabban know that he actually said the Yud Kei Vav Kei's name, pronouncing it. That would be Pashut. But what he says, Hogeh Hashem Beotiotav, means he said Yud Kei Vav Kei, but just saying hey, without any pause in between, and that is an isur. That is something that you cannot do, and that's something that people have to be careful. You will find some people who may be ignoramus when they're saying the Leshem Yichud before the Tefillah, which Ari HaKadosh was very big on. Again, the Hasidic movements, all the tribes of Hasidim and the Sfaradim and Edot HaMizrach are very much big in this. The Ashkenazim maybe less so, at least in generations past. Rabbi Cheskel Landau has a massive tshuva, a keneged, against saying Leshem Yichud. He was very, very strong about it. The story goes that he was, back in the day in Europe, even in the sophisticated Jewish communities, it was not easy to get lulav and etrog coming off of Sukkot. We don't appreciate really what we have, that you could just go to the marketplace and get a beautiful set of arba minim. It was one or two for the whole community, and people used it. So the Rodab Yehuda, of course, was Rav of town. He had a nice set of lulav and etrog, and after he would shake in the first day of Sukkot, people would line up to say the bracha and do the nanuim. So he would ask them, each one that would come, say, would you say L'Shem Yichud? If they would say L'Shem Yichud, he would not give it to them. He was very strong about this. He has a tshuva about it, and so on. But those who do say, and many do, the Hasidim, the Sfaradim, the Edot HaMizrach, you have to be careful. I've seen it, unfortunately, more than once, that the person says the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey back to back as one, and that, according to Tosafot, would be actually Hogeh Hashem Beotiotav would be an isur, and that's one of the reasons that it's not mentioned in the Gemara in that way. But be that as it may, that's just a side rate bite. The Gemara says, why don't you learn it from the tzis? So we saw that tzis was a tas shel zahav, a plate of gold going from ear to ear and 2 etzbaot wide. And the Gemara, once we add it, the Gemara says, well, not so simple that this was in 2 lines anyways, aside from the Tosafot's comment that this was really reading together in 2 different levels. But the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yossi said, Ani reitiv beromi. Now we know Rabbi Yossi was in Rome. The Gemara in Yuma, for those who've learned, Gemara says that he saw the parochet in Rome, the parochet, the actual parochet of the division between Kodesh and Kodesh HaKodashim. Here is that he actually saw the tzitz that was taken also to Rome, maybe still somewhere down there in the Vatican, or not. Says the Gemara, Ani reitiv beromi. I actually saw the tzitz in Rome. The katuv alav kodesh laHashem b'shita achad. It was not 2 lines. It was 1 straight line, kodesh leYud Kei Vav Kei, and that is the tzitz. So now the question of the Gemara is, why don't you learn it from the tzitz? That's smaller. You want small. You're saying tafasta beruba lo tafasta. So already you learn it from the tzitz. That's smaller. The Gemara says no. Danin keli mikli ve'en danin kli mitachshit. We learn the kelim of the Bet HaMikdash from the kelim of the Bet HaMikdash. The kaporet is a kli, and the misgeret of the shulchan is part of a kli as well. It's a kli. So we learn a kli from a kli, but you cannot learn a kli from a a decoration of the vessels of Kohen Gadol. That is not a vessel. That's just a tachshit. That is one of the garments of the Kohen Gadol. Says the Gemara, if that's correct already, v'nilaf miser, we have two other items that have a crown around them also. So you have the misgeret of the shulchan, which is a designed side piece that goes around the shulchan, but we also have a crown for the mizbeach, and we have a crown for the aron itself. Those are called zer zahav, right? The mizbeach hazahav had it, and the aron hakodesh, the aron ha'edut also had it. V'nilaf mizer, we should learn it from zer. The amar more zer mashehu. The zer was mamash e mashehu. It was a small around the aron, around the mizbeach. So the Gemara says, no, that's also not a kli. Now this becomes very sticky already, because this is very similar to what miskeret itself is, going around a beautiful piece of gold, going around the aron, going around the mizbeach. The Gemara says, no, that's not a kli. Danin kli mi kli ven danin kli me hechsher kli. This is a tafel, a part. It's just a hechsher kli. It's not considered the kli itself. If that's correct, this is very similar to the miskeret, and you're attempting to learn from miskeret. Mara says, no, miskeret is very different. Says the Mara, miskarto lemata. This is an essential part of shulchan, the miskeret, because if you remember, I actually intentionally said it like this 5 minutes ago when we started this, that there was the 4 legs of the shulchan, and resting on them was this piece going around, miskeret, and on top of that sat the plate, the platform of the knei shulchan. So really, what is holding the platform of the entire shulchan and lechem apanims is the miskeret. So it's not just some decoration and a design. It's not tafel. It's one of the fundamental things that's holding together the entire shulchan. So says the Gemara, well, I understand that, but you know and I know that there's machloket where this miskeret sat. Was it exactly like what we just said? Or maybe it was the platform sitting on the 4 legs, and the miskeret was sitting on top just as a decoration, not holding anything. If that's the case, so then it will be the same exact setup as the zer zahav of the aron, the zer zahav of the mizbeach. How do you reconcile that according to those who believe the miskeret of the shulchan was not on the bottom of the platform, but it was on top of the platform, not holding anything together? Says the Gemara, that works according to the Mandamar, that the miskeret was lemata, on the bottom, holding together the 4 legs of the shulchan, and also supporting the platform of the plate on top, holding the entire knei hashulchan, of holding the lechem hapanim. But if you say the miskeret was sitting above the platform, not holding anything together, then how do you answer that? Hai hechsher keliu. That's also considered hechsher keli. So that's not correct, says the Gemara. That's not a scratch that, basically. Danin davar sheni. You know why we learn from the miskeret and not from the zer zahav? Do you know why we learn from the piece around the shulchan, but not the pieces around the aron and the mizbeach? Very simple. Because danin davar shenatna bo Torah midah midavar shenatna bo Torah midah. We need to learn something. The kapora doesn't have a measurement. And when you want to know the measurement, you have to learn it from something that the Torah gives measurements for. You can't learn it from something that doesn't have any measurements. Zer doesn't have any measurements, right? But the kaporet is learned from the miskeret. The kaporet, we have the measurements for it, right? We have the measurements of the length, 2.5. We have the measurement of the width, 1.5. We just don't have the measurement, the third measurement of the height. So when you want to learn the measurement of the height, which has to have measurement, we learn it from something that the Torah actually gave measurements for. And this piece going around the Shulchan, Misgarto Tefach Saviv, it says measurement. It says the Torah was Tefach. But Zer has no measurements. It's called Shumashu. It doesn't say anything. It just say make a Zer Zahav Saviv, make a crown around it. It doesn't give any measurements for it. So therefore we learn something that has measurement from something that has measurement. We don't learn something that has measurement from something that has no measurements and has not been given any measurements. Says the Gemara, fine. Gemara is finally convinced we learn it from there, according to this first account in the Gemara, and therefore, V'al yochichu tzitz vezer, don't bring tzitz zahav or zer zahav that don't have any measurements given to them in the Torah. Shelo natna bahen Torah midah klal. So that's one account. Rav Huna says a different story. Rav Huna says, no, you know how you know that's a tefach? Back to our original question. How do we know that the thickness, the height of kaporet has to be a tefach thick? How do you know that? Rav Huna says, I learned it from the Psukim. It's not that go find the smallest thing you could find. Right? That's one way. It says, well, if the Torah doesn't give measurements, must be that the Torah wants me to learn it from the smallest kli in the measurements that are mentioned in the Torah. Rav Huna says you don't need to do that. It's an explicit learning from the Psukim itself. It's more scientifically appealing. Says the Gemara, Amar mehacha. Al penei hakaporet, it says, penei hakaporet, which means the face of kaporet. The word face is not the usual word to be used for vessels, but it does use it for kaporet. This, that we want to know how much the thickness of it was, it uses the word penei hakaporet, the face of kaporet. Ve'en panim pachot mitefach. And panim, face, you don't find the face of a human being smaller than a tefach, right? So it has to be the smallest measurement of a face that you find. Don't you say, if you say face, why don't you learn it from ape the Bar Yochni? Rashi says Bar Yochni was a very large bird, and the face is larger than a tefach. So why don't you learn it from that? The Gemara says again, the secret line of tafasta meruba, lo tafasta, tafasta mu'at, tafasta. We already learned the drill, right? That's the, we know if you could learn from two different things, you go with the minimum, not with larger than minimum. So says the Gemara, ve'ema ka'apeh desiparta. So if you want to go little, go with the face of a bird, a regular small bird. That's much smaller than tefach. Gemara says no. Amar Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, Rav Huna, penei gamar. It's not that Rav Huna said, well, it says penei kaporet, let's go find the smallest face. No, it's much more sophisticated than that. Rav Huna says, it says penei kaporet, the word panim is mentioned by kaporet, and it's a gezerah shava with elsewhere that the word panim is used. He learned gezerah shava penei from two different places, equating them together, because over here it says penei kaporet, ktiv hacha el penei kaporet, uchtiv hatam me'et penei Yitzchak aviv. Over there it says penei Yitzchak aviv, so it's the face of Yitzchak is compared with the face of kaporet, so we know we're talking about human being face, not a bird. Fine. So says the Gemara, "Venilaf mipanim shel mala." If you're already saying that, so learn from the panim, the panim of the malachim, The Gemara is assuming over here that the panim of malachim is larger. Dichtiv kirot pene elokim. Right? When Yaakov Avinu finally, after 22 years, or 20 years really, meets his brother Esav, he says, oh, me seeing you is like seeing Pnei Elokim, is like seeing a malach, right? Which is something nice and poetic, but really he was hinting to him like, I already beat up your malach yesterday, the Saron Shel Esav, so don't be so excited, right? So, but Pnei Elokim means the face of a malach. The Gemara is assuming the face of a malach is going to be larger than the face of a human being. And the Gemara says, no, tafasta meruba lo tafasta, already the same drill. If you know the Pnei Adam, Pnei Malach, you go with the smaller one because of this tafasta meruba business, that we go with the minimum amount, not with the larger than minimum. So says the Gemara, Venilaf mikruv. This is whole planned, right, to get us to this stage in the Gemara. Gemara says, why don't you learn from the keruvim? Right? That would be the natural learning, because after all, what are we trying to learn? The width of the kaporet. Guess what sits on top of the kaporet? It's actually one piece. It's a one-piece solid gold with the keruvim. And by the keruvim also it says Pnei keruvim. So let us learn Venilaf mikeruv dichtiv el hakaporet yihu Pnei hakeruvim. It says to the kaporet should be the face of the keruvim. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov gemiri en pre keruvim pechotin mitefach. He says that's exactly where Rav Huna is learning it from. We are learning it from Pnei keruvim. But Pnei keruvim also is a tefach, exactly. So that's what we're learning, the tefach. The Rav Huna nami mehacha gamir. Rav Huna also is learning it from Pnei keruvim, the gezerah shava that he has. It says el Pnei kaporet. It says the word Pnei hakaporet, and it also says Pnei keruvim. So both of those really go together hand in hand. It's a gezerah shava, learning the measurement of the thickness, the height of the kaporet from the keruvim. So says the Gemara, umay keruv. Why are the keruvim, these angelic faces above the kaporet, why are they considered called keruv? What is keruv, right? Says the Gemara, keruv is keravya. Amarav avahu keravya, like a baby, a face of a baby. Sheken beBavel korin leyenuka ravya. In Bavel, in Aramaic, they call a baby Ravya. So keruv is the baby faces of these angelic forms that were on top of the kaporet. Again, there's a lot to talk about all of this. Maybe time allowing, not now, we'll get a little bit to the deeper sense of these Gemarot. Says the Gemara, Amar le Abaye el Ma'ata dichtiv Pnei ha'echad Pnei Adam. Says the Gemara, Pnei Adam Pnei Keruv, uPnei Hasheni Pnei Adam. The pasuk says in the Nevuah of Yecheskel, the Kisah Kavod is mentioned over there in the beginning of Sefer Yecheskel. This is the famous Maaseh Merkava that Yecheskel ben Buzia Kohen, the Davi Yecheskel saw, and when he describes the faces of this, says each one of the four sides has a different face. One side is Pnei Keruv, one of them is Keruv, and the other side is Adam. If you're telling me that Keruv is the face of an Adam, is the face of a baby, so that's the same thing as Adam. That's the question of Abaye, a valid, great question. Gemara says, correct, it's the same, it's a face of human being, but one of them is Ape Ravrevi, the Ape Zutri. Keruv is a baby face, is a smaller face of a baby, of a child, and Pnei Adam is an adult, an image of an adult human being. So says the Gemara, the size is different, and therefore we learn from Keruv, which is a tefach. And then the Gemara now says, after all of this, Gemara asks a question. Says, wait a second, so you told me that the Shekhinah is on top of the kaporet, and kaporet plus the aron is 10 tefachim. Therefore, you learn that the sukkah has to be 10 tefachim. But just like Aaron doesn't have a halal, a cavity inside of it of 10 tefachim, one tefach of it is what? Is the kaporet. So maybe the sukkah also, together with the ceiling, has to be 10 tefachim. Who told you that you need a halal of 10 tefachim? Who told you that you need? That's a bomb question. It's a bombshell. Okay, you went through a whole amud, back, forth. You need 10 tefachim. Chazaku baruch. We now understand that the Aaron was 9 tefachim and the kaporet was 1 tefach. I give it to you. But you don't have a cavity of 10, you have a cavity of 9 inside. So maybe here also cavity of 9 should be good enough. With the schach together would be 10 tefachim. How do you know that you need actual space, open space of 10 tefachim? That is a question that Be'ezrat Hashem will be dealing with in the days to come. Hazak Baruch.